Good afternoon. This is Debbie Q, and you're listening to The Right Shoe. The Right Shoe is a podcast. It's been a while since I talked to you folks, but I had few things. I'm going to be getting up my website. It will be therightshoepodcast.com. It's coming out shortly. I just got to tweak a few things. That's why The Right Shoe has been not on the last 2 weeks. I'm trying to keep this really consistent. This week, I wanted to do something that's been done a lot, but I like both these ladies so much. Since I was a kid, I loved Nancy Spungen from, of course, Sid and Nancy, the ultimate Romeo and Juliet punk rock love affair that they had. Then we have Gia Carangi, who is another Philly girl. In fact, both of them are buried very close to my house, so I got pictures from both their gravesides, and I'm going to be posting them. Now I can have all the pictures matching with each podcast. Makes it way more, it's just nicer. Nice touch. I always like pictures. I guess I'll start with Nancy. She was from Philadelphia, right outside Philadelphia. She was actually from Bucks County. Nancy Spungen was born February 27th, 1958, to Deborah and Tom. She was quite the hellraiser. There's a book by Deborah Spungen called And I Don't Want to Live This Life. It comes from a poem that Sid Vicious had wrote to Nancy. It's a really good book. It really explores. See, back then when people had issues, Nancy had schizophrenia, but she didn't just have schizophrenia. She had a lot of other issues. Like I think there was bipolar in there. And back then they really didn't do anything with it. They didn't have the medication and the therapy that they do today. They did diagnose her, so she had some form of treatment. The sad part is she was never treated correctly. Deborah Spungen went through hell raising her. She said she screamed from infancy till she was a kid. Then when the other children were born, she had a brother and a sister. She just tormented them. Not so much the brother, but the sister really badly. The brother she was actually real good with. She was a hellraiser. She graduated from Lakeside High School. Then she was sent to the University of Colorado because she was really smart. So she went there early. She was not even college age yet, but she was at a very high IQ. So somewhere deep inside there was a nice Nancy, but her nickname was Nauseating Nancy. But when she was in Colorado, they kicked her out. She got caught selling weed. And then somewhere, it was around 1977 or 1975, she started getting into the rock stars. She became like a groupie. She went around with Aerosmith. I think she met Iggy Pop before she went to London. Iggy Pop said she wasn't a beauty, but there was something about her, which there really is. If you get there, of course you can Google her, and I'll have pictures on the site. She has a very rocker chic look about her, and she was always wearing that gun necklace with the gun pointing downward. I think Nancy was, she was searching for love. She wanted to meet the Heartbreakers with Johnny Thunders, but mostly Jerry Nolan. He was the drummer for the Heartbreakers. She wanted to give him a pink guitar. In 1977, she went to London to meet the Heartbreakers. Did not get to meet the Heartbreakers at this time. Somebody else was there, and it was Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols. He wanted nothing to do with Nancy. He didn't like her from the beginning. Sid Vicious was also there. His real name was John Simon Ritchie. That was his birth name. But he nicknamed himself Sid Vicious for the Sex Pistols. He was there, and they fell in love. They really did. There was definitely a click. There's such a chemistry. If you want to see a great movie, Sid and Nancy with Gary Oldman and Chloe Webb. Excellent movie, 1986. It's an idealistic version of them, but it's really, really, it's a great movie. And it shows the end scene that I'm going to talk about soon. Because what both these girls have in common is tragedies. They started out, Gia had a little bit more going for her at one point. Nancy seemed to always be skidding on a bad road. Like, she never gained her footing anywhere. And she was heavily addicted to drugs her whole life, especially when she got into heroin. And she got Sid into heroin, and that's another reason Johnny Rotten did not like her. And there was a punk rock movie, and it had Johnny Rotten in it. And he was like sobbing that his friend Sid died of a heroin overdose. And Nancy is truly the one that got him into that stuff. I don't think he ever did heroin until he met her. So they met in 1977. They fell in love. What happened was Sex Pistols wanted to go onto a USA tour, and it became a disaster. For whatever reason, it was just a mess. It didn't work out how they wanted. I don't think anybody was very happy. Johnny Rotten was completely disgusted, and he had created a new band, PIL, in the 80s, and they had really good records. PIL standing for Public Image Limited, and it's he formed that right after, in 1978, after the dissolution of the punk band Sex Pistols. On the other side, you had Sid Vicious, and Nancy was determined to make a star out of him. Now, one thing she really did that was cool was she got him a couple of gigs, and also that's when he sung the cover of Frank Sinatra's I Did It My Way. It's at the end. If you ever seen the movie Goodfellas, it's at the end of Goodfellas, and I always liked that version. I always thought it was an excellent version. I think Sid Vicious would have been okay had they not been as messed up as they were. You can see in any YouTube, anything that you can find on the web of them together, they're always trashed. I mean, it's unbelievable. Nancy seems to hold herself together a little more than Sid, but very bad. So they make this, she's going to make him a star, or she just determined to carry on without the Sex Pistols. And they're going around, they're staying at the Chelsea Hotel. This is what her life was, fast and furious, because she had only gotten to London in 1977. And by October 12th, 1978, tragedy struck. I'm going to upload one of the pictures I found. It's of Nancy. Now, this is supposedly how the night went. Nancy was dead the next morning. Now, in the beginning, there was never any question that Sid had done it. But this is what happened. And people they tend to try to dispute it. I don't know. Let's go and see how the night went. They were staying in room 100 of the Chelsea in New York City. They could not find any heroin that night. They had been on methadone, but methadone never, even though it does take away the edge of needing the heroin, I don't think most heroin addicts want to be on methadone. They want the heroin. They had been on methadone, but it wasn't working. And this one night, for whatever reason, they were sick and they could not find any heroin. Well, when you're sick and you can't get any opiates, the worst thing to do is a barbiturate, or as my doctor says, barbiturate. I never know how to pronounce it because he says it's barbiturate, and I always heard barbiturate. He did 30 triple Tuinals, which were very strong pills, but they weren't opiates. So he just passed out. They said anybody that came into the room that night said he was an absolute zombie. There was no way he could move around. But when you're sick, even when you're that messed up from triple Tuinals, I think he was probably just totally out of it. So he's all messed up on triple Tuinals. He's in the bed, and from weeks of gathering all this money, because they were getting gigs, Nancy they said she always had about $3,000 on her. And this night was probably no different from the rest. They said she had a bunch of cash on her. Big stack of cash. Now, the cash was never found. Anyway, she was probably calling around for heroin. The next morning, Sid wakes up and he finds Nancy under the sink, dead, with a stab wound to the stomach. He said things like, I did it. She fell into the knife. I didn't mean to kill her. Then he started saying, I don't remember. So that could have been him thinking about it and thinking, I got to get out of this, because he didn't want to go to jail. I mean, who wants to go to jail? But then when people were thinking about it, they were like, well, what happened to all the stacks of cash that Nancy had? And there was a dealer named Rockets Red Glare who died in 2001. He was going around bragging, saying that he was the one who killed Nancy. But they said he was somewhat of a braggart, so, you know, you can take that or leave that. I do find a few things funny. He had a knife. Sid had a 007 knife, which was very popular back then. But the knife that was used to kill Nancy was a Jaguar Wilderness K11 with a 5-inch, 13-centimeter blade. It had been cleaned off and sitting on top of like a box or something, or a speaker or some kind of furniture when the cops found it. Because Sid was there and he said that he did it, they never questioned it further. They just arrested him, threw him in jail. He was bailed out, and actually Mick Jagger paid his lawyer's fees. He never said anything about that, and I just learned that the other day. I had never known that either until I started doing... I knew the whole story because I've been enamored with Sid and Nancy since birth. I never knew that Mick Jagger was the one, or was going to pay for Sid Vicious's legal proceedings in the matter of Nancy. But when he was on bail, he got into a fight with Patti Smith's brother. He attacked him, and then he got arrested again, and he was sent into this like 55-day detox. So when he came out, he was super clean. His mom, Ann Beverly, she had heroin for him. I think she did heroin herself. I'm pretty sure she did heroin herself. And of course, when you're clean and then you do heroin, what happens? You OD. And that's exactly what he did. He had a really cute girlfriend, Michelle Robinson, at the time. That wasn't Nancy. And there was an interview. It's so sad. It's one of the last interviews he did. And they said, are you having fun? And he said, are you kidding me? He said, I wish I was 6 feet under. And he kept saying that he genuinely missed Nancy. He tried to jump out of a window. He said he was trying to jump after Nancy. He loved her and he missed her. And they were truly cute together. So I was always struck by that story. Again, I did get pictures of her graveside. I was surprised that, you know, because she was so larger than life, I was surprised at how small the cemetery was that she's in. She's in a very small, I think the whole cemetery's Jewish. I'm pretty sure. Well, yeah, it is. I'm sorry, King David's. But the one section that she's in, it has like a lot of Jewish writing, and it's a cute little cemetery, but it's very tiny. I was just surprised at how small it was. But it's so sad when you look and you think, my God, she was only 20 when she died. She said she would never live to be 21, and she didn't. And it's just really sad. It's a sad story, but it's like a love story. A tragic love story. I do suggest reading that book by her mother because it really shows how deeply disturbed Nancy was. She had a lot of issues. I think maybe in the night, maybe they started fighting because they were both sick. And then he probably went, he had that knife. He'd been playing with it. He got it off of one of the Ramones. And they said he was, he had been playing around with it. And they probably started fighting. And either she did run into it or he jabbed her. Or possibly some junkie or dealer came in, tried to grab their money. Nancy saw, ran after them. Because she would not take shit from anyone. She could have tried to intervene, and then they stabbed her, and then they ran out the door. Nobody would ever know. That would probably be the easiest killing to ever get away with if you were going to do that. Again, that both Nancy and Gia their stories are great, but it's more of a looking thing. That's why they're relatively short, and I put them together. So we get to Gia. Now Gia, she was a Philadelphia girl. She could have been a massive star. Like, she could have turned into a massive celebrity. But what happened was she also got addicted to drugs. Gia was born in Philadelphia. Her mom left when she was 11 years old, and she always craved her mom's attention and never really quite got it. Her mom, they wrote, and I have to agree, was like a fan more than a mother in an odd way. I know a couple people that knew Gia personally, and they said like even in the end of her life, you couldn't even get near Gia. Like people wanted to visit her in the hospital, and her mom just would not let anybody come in. She probably didn't want anyone to see her like that because this is when, her illness had first come out and nobody knew what it was. And I'm sure she didn't look all that great. In the movie that starred Angelina Jolie, I think like her skin was starting to come off and it probably wasn't a pretty sight. Gia was born on January 29th, 1960. She went to Lincoln High School. There's a good book about her named Thing of Beauty by Stephen Fried, Fried. Very good book. Of course, there was the famous movie in 1998 by Angelina Jolie. Gia was at, like, there was a lot of clubs in Philadelphia back then, like the Empire Rock Club. They were under 21 clubs, and even the clubs, you could drink if you were, well, I don't know when they made the drinking age from 18 to 21, but it could have been around that time. I just know that there was clubs that, like, if you were 18 to 21, you could come in and supposedly not drink, even though everyone did. And if you were 21, you would drink and dance, and they were nice. There was a lot of clubs like that. So she was at one of these clubs when a photographer spotted her, and she started getting pictures taken for, like, little gigs around Philadelphia, like local advertisements and stuff. But they sent her up to New York, and she just was in the stratosphere immediately. She was working with Francesco Scavullo, and I know Wilhelmina Cooper took her on right off the bat, and they became good friends, and it was just given to her. And we all know what happens when something is given to us and we don't have to work for it. We don't appreciate it. And that's what happened. She was gay. She never really was overt about it so much. She did in one of the first pictures she took, Chris von Wagenheim. He took these pictures of her and this makeup artist, Sandy Littner. And she fell in love with Sandy big time. Sandy was a beautiful blonde. They were like really cute together. She always loved Sandy more than Sandy loved her. And I don't think Sandy was necessarily, she might have been bisexual, but I don't think she was entirely gay. She was a gay girl. Like she would give him flowers, and they said she was like almost like a man in her romantic ways. But she loved Sandy, and she always wanted her more than Sandy wanted her. It's kind of sad in that way. It's like when you really love someone and they just don't love you in that same manner. So the pictures of Gia are just so amazing. And the ones that Francesco Scavullo did are so gorgeous. I mean, you can just tell she was so beautiful, and she just was rising up, but she started getting addicted to heroin. Even when she was doing coke, Francesco Scavullo said one time he had to take her and help her because I guess she ran out of coke and she couldn't sleep and she was crying, and he had to like sit with her while she calmed down. I mean, she was truly, when you're young, I know it's, easy to get caught up in the drug scene, but she really did, to the point where it destroyed everything she could have had. That's what I was about to say about Cindy Crawford. Cindy Crawford, when she came out, they called her Baby Gia because she looked remarkably like her. And I think Gia could have had all that Cindy Crawford had if she had done what Cindy Crawford did and took it and ran with it instead of screwing it up with the drugs. The drugs destroyed her. It destroyed not only her career, but her life. So she was in New York, and she started getting a very bad reputation. She would leave gigs to get heroin. Eventually, she had to come back. She tried to go to rehab. She went on, there was a 2020 episode where she said she was making a comeback. By that time, they said it was like a joke. She was dragging around the pictures. The one big pictures in the beginning that she had were these pictures of her and Sandy are naked behind this chain link fence. and they were like scandalous, you know, in the beginning, and they were cutting edge. But by the time 1982 rolled around, they weren't scandalous or cutting edge. And she was still walking around with these pictures, and she was like so proud of them. But everyone said it was kind of sad because her career was ruined by then, and nobody wanted anything to do with her. Francesco Scavullo was the one guy that gave her a chance, and he did a couple of shots of Cosmopolitan for her. And you should see in this one picture that, again, I will put, this is why I like that I'm going to have the website up, because now you can go there and the pictures will be there. But you can see, like, even his assistant said that her eyes, they were gone. The light in her eyes were gone. There was no more. So it was very sad. It was just a shame. She could have had so much. And then, so, you know, 1978, she had got there. She was like a big Studio 54 person. Then she gets so hooked on these drugs, especially heroin. By 1980, they said no one wanted to work with her. She comes back to Philly. She tried to make a comeback, and people were willing to try, but she messed up again. And the last time she went, it was a German catalog, and they sent her home because they said she just was incorrigible. There was nothing they could do with her, so they sent her home. Now, during this time, when she was trying to get clean, and again, that's what I mean, it was like fast and furious. She came back, and I know she got raped a couple times because she would go out and try to get heroin any way she could. So she would go in these neighborhoods by herself. And when you're in that dangerous setting with no one to protect you, and you're sick on top of that, she was probably, you know, drug sick and just wasn't thinking right. So in 1980, that's when Wilhelmina Cooper died. She became devastated by this. And she was young, like she would write her thoughts down. But when you're young, it is different than when you're older. When you're older, you can kind of take and deal with things. When you're young, everything is much more dramatic and overwhelming. So I think that's what happened to her when she came back to try to get clean. She never could, and she always wanted the attention of her mother. And for whatever reason, the relationship between her and her mom was very bizarre. And like I said, it was almost like she was a fan rather than a mother, like an ardent fan of her own daughter. You know, she should have just, God, I don't know. When somebody's that addicted to drugs, what do you do? Unless they want to get help, it's almost next to impossible to get somebody help. So she got raped a couple times. I think one of the times was on South Street. And she, you know, trying to get the heroin by herself. She had no one. Like I know that I mentioned before, I had my own problems with addiction when I was in that way, and I would have to go into like a neighborhood or something. I always had like male friends that would go in there for me. I would never go into certain neighborhoods by myself. So that to me was always striking. Like I feel bad that didn't she have anybody that she could have taken with her? That always baffled me. So I guess this would be around 1982, and she finally, I think, did get clean. And she met a couple good people. I know there was a couple pictures at in that thing, a beauty book, of her with a few friends that she met in rehab. Then she got a job at a cafeteria, which, you know, to go from Francesco Scavullo to the cafeteria, it's just so depressing to think about. And even when he tried to get her back into Cosmo and how she looked so weak. So she comes back, she gets kind of straightened up, and then she got sick. And this is around the time when AIDS just started. And in 1986, it was pretty much really coming along. I think Rock Hudson came out in 1985, but nobody even knew that she had AIDS. Like in her little bit of time that she was this huge model, and everyone worked with her and everyone loved her and adored her. I mean, everybody wanted to work with her. I can't get across how big she really was. I mean, she was huge. And then to go to the point where nobody even knows you have AIDS. And it was back then when it just came out. And she was one of the first celebrities to get it. Nobody even knew that she had it. Nobody was at her funeral. Nobody famous. Nobody knew. Francesco Scavullo said he was shocked. And I use his name frequently because he seemed to be the most sympathetic towards her. And the one that really gave it his all when he didn't have to. He really seemed like a good guy. She got AIDS and she was in Warminster Hospital. And that's when there was a song by Simple Minds called Don't You Forget About Me. And the one guy that she had met in rehab said that he did get to visit her because her mom really wouldn't let anybody visit, but this guy got in there. So he said that she danced and it was to Don't You Forget About Me by Simple Minds. Take a listen to that song because that's a really fitting song. Every time I hear that song, I think of Gia. Today, I went to, now on the flip side of Nancy's small cemetery, I went to Gia's Sunset Memorial Park. My daughter and me looked for 45 minutes. I did not realize the map was literally the little pin. It was pinned. I didn't realize that until we got out of there. It started pouring rain, so we had to leave. But I'm going to get that picture. I just can't believe how big that cemetery is. Also, Tina's there. Tina Severance from episode 2. I just thought of that. And that was a little short, and I'm sorry, but this last 2 weeks, I'm telling you, I was going nuts trying to get everything together. I really love doing this podcast, and I love that my numbers are going up, and I love that you guys are listening, and I'm sorry these were a little shorter. They're no less fantabulous, and I know it's not exactly strange and unusual. They both lived and died hard, and they're really, besides the little bit of mystery, and it could have been a junkie or a thief that got to Nancy. We don't know. But with Gia, it was straight up AIDS. But her story to me was always such a rags to riches to rags that I just had to have them. I love them dearly. They have been my idols for years. Nancy, because she was like the punk rock princess, and Gia, because she was just so freaking gorgeous. I mean, this girl was beyond unearthly gorgeous. When you look at, you gotta Google her. She's all over the place now. When I was younger, you couldn't find any pictures. Now it's all over the web. I mean, go on Pinterest, or people have beautiful collages of her. I really do love the web for that they've updated it. When I was a kid, you didn't have all this good stuff. She really was a heartbreaker. And then to take your looks that quickly. Plus, we don't know when she obtained HIV status. I mean, she died from the complications of AIDS, but who knows when she got HIV. And in the beginning, there was no medication for any of this. This was back when they didn't even have AZT or nothing. She could have lost her looks due to that as well. Because when you get clean, you do start looking better. And there's really no pictures of her getting to that point. They're two of my favorites. And again, check out when you can. If it's not up, it will be very, very fast. I'm really going to try to time this podcast with the website because I really don't want to be saying it and then you go there and it still says private. It's going to be therightshoepodcast.com. I wanted a com. Originally I still own it, therightshoe.org, but I don't like org. I like com. So that's a common. And this is Nancy and Gia, and it's not really a true, unsolved true crime. The next one I'm going to do, though, it's not from Philly, which I try to keep in Philly, but this one has me very disturbed. I saw it on TV. I'm going to investigate what happened. It's a story of Angel Bumpus. If any of you haven't heard of her, she's a young girl. She's from Tennessee, but I think she lives elsewhere now. I have to, again, I can't remember the smaller details. I just know that she got life, basically, 61 years for allegedly killing someone. And she was only 13 at the time. The details are very sketchy. But Angela Bumpus is next. Then we got Joey Coyle coming after that. He's a fellow Philadelphian. Fascinating story. And this is Debbie Q, and you're listening to The Right Shoe.